All right. What's going on, y'all? Let's take a deep dive into the strategies, the tactics, and the principles that I helped Revenue Roll and their sales team implement to shorten their sales cycle, attract new customers, and position themselves to raise more capital for future rounds. So, this encompasses sales conversations and sales processes and playbooks, as well as copywriting for VSLs, case studies, email sequences, etc. So let's go back to the very beginning. Let me pop us in. Let's begin. So, with their seed round coming to a close, Revenue Roll co-founder, then COO, Michael Diezu could have rested on his laurels. He had a lot to celebrate. Revenue Roll was nearing the close of an exciting seed round. They had a roster of major players in e-commerce as happy customers. He had secured solid runway even during a tenuous moment in the U.S. economy, and he was a new father who had recently moved to Miami from New York City, where I am. So, like all great founders, though, he was hungry to capitalize on the momentum that they had generated. His focus was on expansion, and he was looking several quarters ahead. Knowing that what had gotten him to where he was not going to take him where he wanted to go, he was looking to level up Revenue Roll's sales process, playbook, and skills, identify their unique brand identity and value proposition to create assets that would attract their ideal customers and amplify his own presence and power as a leader and communicator. We met weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, for 7 months, and we dove deep. We'd review sales calls, revise copy for case studies, VSLs, email sequences, landing pages, train tonality and delivery, and sharpen mindset. And as a result, Revenue Roll is not only entering 2024 prepared to further scale their go-to-market team, but also with a library of relevant and persuasive sales assets and an outreach playbook that converts cold leads and traffic into customers and record revenue quarters behind them. Oh, and Michael also got a title change. Now he's the CEO. So let's look closer into what we worked on. Because sales is where personal presence and power and brand identity and value proposition and process converge, the recipe for these results can be seen most clearly by investigating what we implemented in their go-to-market playbook. So imagine then this is a conversation. We're implementing these things in a discovery conversation or any conversation happening during a sales cycle. So let's look at communication frameworks, right? This is the what you say. So we had to look at what was being communicated. The Revenue Roll team was obviously closing deals, but in looking to level up skills as well as prepare for scale, they knew they needed more structure in guiding conversation with a prospect from start to finish. Without it, they were unknowingly commoditizing their solution's unique value and lengthening their sales cycle, which meant they found themselves competing on price and sometimes come off as needy. And this is where implementing a few communication frameworks matched with proven methodology paid off really handsomely. So this principle here, right? Always be relevant. This is going to apply to every single touch point that you have with a prospect. But how do you become relevant? What is it? And what is it not? What do most people, not just what were they doing prior to our work together, but what do most people do? What does the average do? We want to be anything but average. So it's common for sellers, even those with long tenures, to do a few things: show up and throw up, right? Talking about their solution as soon as they get the chance, talking too much, and failing to acquire specific information. None of these needs to occur, yet they're all too commonly accepted. Sure, deals can and do close in spite of them, but why settle for the status quo? Going the extra mile in pursuit of sales and communication excellence shortens the sales cycle. It builds deeper trust with prospects, and it creates the opportunity to solve problems with your solution at the level of executive rather than business unit initiative, which means significantly increased ARR and also provides a clear roadmap for over delivery during fulfillment and upsell opportunities. So how do we do this? Like I said, by being relevant. Relevance, in addition to establishing this clear message. Requires impulse control, situational awareness, EQ, and synthesis of data, as well as the ability to acquire said data. So let's map what having that looks like to those three common traits above. Instead of talking about your solution as soon as you get a chance, say, for example, within the first 20% of a call, you get comfortable with the possibility that you bring your solution up in the last 20% of a call, and only after you have extracted sufficient data. More on that later. Sometimes sellers talk too much because they feel that the more they say, the smarter and more trustworthy they seem. Or they talk too much because they're nervous. Maybe it's a critical logo on the line, or the prospect is intimidating in title or gravitas, or both. Or they have anxiety related to public speaking. Training yourself not only to speak less, but to say more with less creates space to discover more about the prospect's situation and then strengthens the seller's power and presence. Bonus points if the little that you do say is engaging and persuasive, but we'll get to that shortly. A general statement appearing to be in a positive direction for the sale, taking one at face value, such as, I'll relay this to my boss, or yes, let's meet next week with our team, is often considered a win in a sales conversation. But without clarifying exactly what is going to be relayed to their boss or establishing why that team is going to join the next sales call, a seller loses power. So uncovering this information is not only critical to determining whether or not a seller should spend breath on a pitch, but how they maintain engagement with a prospect during a sales cycle. For example, sending a follow-up email to a prospect who is unresponsive, or persuading a prospect to bring their boss or their boss's boss. Remember, we're trying to get to that executive initiative here, to the next meeting. So acquiring specific information without making a prospect feel interrogated is a master skill, but it's easily accessible, and we're going to cover it here in a bit. So we needed to implement a framework, and there's a bunch of different frameworks that you could choose from: Spin, Bant, Sandler, Challenger, Medic, NEPQ, Target Selling, Solution Selling, etc. The list goes on, and it can be overwhelming to pick one to implement. And there's no wrong choice, because with the proper perspective, they're all complementary to one another. So I encouraged Revenue Roll to implement Medic in their selling conversations, because Medic is broad enough to encompass influences from any or all of the above, while still being specific enough to provide a seller and a manager a roadmap to know exactly what they need to do in any given conversation at any point in the sales process. It also reflects the reality of virtually every sales conversation, whether it's enterprise, whether it's SMB, it's SaaS, it's B2B, it's B2C, etc. So we turbocharged Medic with command of the message, or some ideas from command of the message, specifically the identification of, and then the communication thereof, of Revenue Roll's value drivers. Because another common trait that happens for the average seller or communicator is feature dumping. And it's well-intentioned, but what it makes a prospect's eyes do is glaze over. Their attention, it loses the prospect's attention. Their eyes will glaze over, right? Because feature dumping reads like a table of contents on an installation guide. And it doesn't tell the prospect what you can do for them. And the antidote to feature dumping is to focus on benefits. So command of the message is the flagship program of the premier sales training organization, Force Management. And it emphasizes that the benefits of all solutions fall into at least one, if not multiple, of the following categories. A solution can grow revenue, reduce risk, accelerate time to value, or reduce cost, So we've got all this established, right? The next challenge, we've got this roadmap laid out. We know where we're going. We know what information we need to extract. We know what we do. But then we've got to explain it like we're five. Really simplify the problems that we solve, the possibilities that we deliver. So using all of the above to guide sales conversations allowed Revenue Roll to not only sell more effectively, but save time and resources by not trying to sell to prospects for whom they weren't a good fit. Because they're so clear on what they do, who they help, and how, it also allows them to be clear on who they don't help, who they can't help. So then we've got all that laid out, right? But now comes the actual point where we're face to face, either Zoom, in person, at a conference floor. Maybe I need some more electrolytes, etc. We're actually having a conversation. And I can say all the right things about our solution, and I know what information I'm looking for. But how can I guide this conversation so that I'm getting the specific answers from a prospect to help me understand what I need to know? This is the art of getting specific answers without interrogating. And the reason that we don't want to interrogate, or that we need to be careful to not give off that vibe, is because we're looking to build a long-term relationship. We're not looking for something transactional. So to get specific answers without interrogating, you've got to do two things. You've got to listen for generalized responses. You've got to prompt or ask the question correctly. And you got to be comfortable with silence. A general response or a generalized response is something like, what do you want to do? What are your goals here? Well, we'd like to increase our conversion rate. To which the average seller is going to say, great, we can help you do that. Here's what we've done for company XYZ. All right, but a more elite communicator recognizes the possibilities that such an answer opens up. It is a good start, but remember to that point about you don't want to pitch too soon. We still need some more data. It's hardly the whole picture. So there's not only the path of discovery that follows why that's their desire. What does it look like if you don't increase that conversion rate? What have you already tried to do that? Why isn't that working? But then what their specific rate is. Where is it at right now? Is that good? How are you measuring that? So an elite communicator must train their ears to perk up at such language. And this is what we were doing during every review of a sales call, is identifying where this was happening, where it wasn't happening, identifying possible causes around why, and then role-playing and rehearsing what that would look like, as well as identifying questions to ask. So even if a communicator's ears are so trained, knowing how to frame these questions in such a way as to get that desired information is critical. So it's got to be open-ended, and we will get to the actual tonality of asking these questions in a second. But as far as writing down, transcribing the actual questions themselves, they've got to be open-ended yet innocuous questions. Some that work phenomenally well, that are super simple. What's that look like? And what's working about X, or what's not working about X? Questions like that are going to deliver all of the details necessary to create relevance. Aspiring elite communicators should beware, however, that the first salvo of words in response is often just the tip of the iceberg, if they have the courage to shut their mouth. Then you get the rest of the iceberg. So to our point above about talking too much, similarly, any pause or silence can trigger a seller's nervousness such that they rush along to the next thing. But if they can hold fast, then they're liable to find that their prospect has much more to say on the subject, and in doing so often reveals even deeper, more core pains, fears, and desires. So a lot of times a sales organization is going to have a script or a particular flow that is more or less a script. And initially, this is what Revenue Roll was looking to build, especially for discovery calls. And while scripts are useful, they can create additional problems, because we're not talking about one individual seller here who's like, okay, great. Well, sometimes I don't use that script. We're also considering, how are we going to train a growing organization, right? What are we going to teach? What principles are we going to teach about how to engage in a sales conversation, how to engage with prospects, whether in initial discovery or later in customer success conversations, etc. So, having a framework that you base your communication on is able to apply much more broadly to any situation. So, a script, by definition, you're asking a prospect to stay within the lines, pun intended, in a conversation. It doesn't allow for very much flexibility. The issue with that is that only one person has the script. And this hampers a seller's ability to be fully present while listening and responding. And being fully present is a core requirement of a powerful presence. And without a script, though, sellers will sometimes wonder about what they should say next. And when you're wondering what to say next, you're thinking, what question or statement is going to be most clever? What's going to get this prospect to say, wow, I've never thought about it that way, or that's a good question, or you're such a brilliant salesperson. Why don't you come work for us? But thinking about this while somebody else is talking, while they're giving you the information, or at least they're saying the information that you're looking for, you're not present and you're also missing that information. It takes you out of the present moment. And then it rarely, when you do ask the question, it rarely has the desired effect, and it derails the conversation into irrelevance, or at the very least, it makes you seem less seasoned. So instead, you can free up brain power, maintain presence, and stay relevant by giving permission to yourself to ask or say what's obvious, instead of what might be clever or funny or what you think is going to get the prospect to say, oh, that's a good question. And so this also is what we were looking at and identifying in these sales call reviews. And then once corrected is what led to such record growth. So having the guidance of a sales methodology to know what information you need, and then having the communication frameworks as described above, both to identify what your unique value proposition is and how to communicate that, creates way more opportunity for relevance than having a script. So we've covered how we established the what you say. But now let's talk about the how you say it, often known as tonality. So this matters massively in extracting that data, in communicating your message, but it matters most initially in making an impression, how the seller is perceived by the prospect. It's setting the tone, right? A first impression is everything. A first impression is made somewhere between 1/10 of a second and 7 seconds, depending on which study you reference. Since the primary tool for communication for human beings is the voice, we're thinking about the speed of sound, and the speed of sound definitely travels within that window. It definitely lands within that window. So as such, then the vocal energy that you bring to a call goes a long way in making your process of data extraction and relationship building an uphill one filled with resistance, or can create calm seas for smooth sailing, right? So the challenge for the Revenue Rule sales team was creating an authentic and reliable vocal first impression on every call. Sometimes vocal energy could be flat, indicating a lack of vitality, or it could seem defensive, indicating insecurity. But other times it was warm and vibrant and inviting. And again, this is not unique to Revenue Roll. This happens with everybody, because even if we just look at those examples, flat, indicating a lack of vitality, does that mean that a seller lacks vitality or is uninterested? No. It just means that maybe they're at the end of a long day and they're a little bit checked out for the day. Or if it's defensive, maybe they feel attacked or threatened by a prospect. Maybe they don't know how to respond to a question about, well, how are you different than your competitors? X, Y, or Z. And even if you know what to say and how to communicate in those moments, being aware of one's own state matters a whole lot, not getting triggered by such a thing. Sales and communication these are really performance skills. And so, for as much training as you can do on an individual's mindset and tools that you can give them to manage and control their state so that they show up as their best selves, no matter what is going on to every call, it's a professional standard, right? You can change your state simply by changing your voice. It's not unlike changing your posture or forcing yourself to smile and then you're instantly in a better mood, right? So, not only can mastering and training your tonality allow you to change your state, show up as your best self, create the best vocal impression right away, but it also helps you to communicate, build trust. So let's get into that. So, as co-founder, then Michael was also looking to make the best impression that he could on video sales assets so as to get attention faster and hold it longer. So the key to not just stabilizing their tonality, but optimizing it for maximum effect towards their desired outcome was to implement 3 of the 7 skills of tonality, right? So tonality is not just how you say it. It's different for every person. Their understanding is going to be different for every person. Everybody has the same vocal anatomy, but information on how to use their vocal anatomy authentically for themselves is not equally distributed. So giving people the right tools for them to authentically unlock and say something, how they unlock their voice and say something how they mean to say it is key. So the 3 skills that we focused on, the 7 skills are resonance, articulation, imagination, mindset, intention, subtext, and stakes. When you understand each one of these things independently and then how they go together, you are able to maximally use your tonality, use your voice. So we focused on mindset, right? See also those examples before about controlling your state, showing up to a call as your best self, that professional standard. Mindset is the M in that acronym. And as it applies to the revenue roll team, this was the frame that they were seeing themselves in while engaging with prospects. And so once we solidified that based on conversations around individual and around brand value, a mindset of abundance, strength, and grace, sales conversations became more reliably productive from the start because abundance, strength, and grace is then how you tell yourself you are entering every conversation with. Almost impossible to fail once you have that. But why settle for just this one thing when we can build even more mastery and understanding of one's own skills and ability? Next, we focused on resonance. And this, of course, is the R in those 7 skills in that acronym. So by working with the revenue roll team to first unlock and then to strategically access the various resonating chambers available in their voice, the revenue roll team was able to communicate with much more nuance. So beyond securing a first impression that's in alignment with their desired mindset, that gave them the ability to emphasize points and then ask delicate questions in a way that moved conversations forward without offense or creating confusion. Because remember, each one of these touch points is an opportunity to be relevant, but it also, and even if it's not your first impression, it still matters because we are building a long-term relationship. So the next skill that we focused on is intention. And this is the second I in the tonality skills. And it's really the ultimate linchpin. It's the secret sauce in getting specific answers, and it acts as a potentiator for the already established mindset. It goes a really long way in helping to guide a communicator in gauging how much or how little they're saying. A pure and selfless intention is going to infuse every word and interaction and elevate the vibration and thus the power of a communicator. And so, intention here is that you want them to win more than you want validation. You want them to win more than you want to be right. You want them to win more than you want to hear how great you are, right? It's tied to that principle of obvious instead of clever. So then we needed to understand revenue roll in the market, their positioning, and then how they differentiate themselves from the competitor. Once they understand that for themselves and are really clear on it, not only then are they going to be able to communicate that succinctly and in a relevant way, When asked, for example, a question like, well, how are you different than XYZ competitor? But also, it helps to bolster the mindset that they go in there with, right? Abundance, strength, and grace. We know that we do this and that we are great at this. We know exactly who we are and exactly why we're awesome. So that builds conviction. And there's few things more compelling, few things more engaging or persuasive than authentic conviction. So clearly understanding the problems that their prospects and customers are facing and the goals that they had, coupled with that new mindset around selling, allowed Revenue Roll to articulate what they did differently than other solutions in the marketplace. And in a sales conversation, this means that they can communicate with relevance when asked about any such solution while maintaining presence and power. And then, when translated to the written word for sales assets, this meant that they were able to pique the interest of a potential prospect and channel their desire into booking a call, whether that's from cold outreach via email or organic sales traffic. So you land on the Revenue Roll website, or you get an email from Revenue Roll, or you get one of their ads, and it's very clear what they do, how they help, who they are. So, as it applies to putting them in a position to raise more capital, everything that we've covered applies to any sales conversation. And a sales conversation is not limited to just somebody who wants to purchase the solution to help them profitably scale their brand, but it also includes VCs and people who want to invest in future rounds. One of the things that's most attractive to VCs is how well you retain your customers, right? It's not just that you need to bring on new logos, but that you need to keep those logos and that you need to get more value out of those logos over a lifetime. So, while exponential growth in personal power and presence for a seller through communication and mindset training makes a marked difference in their selling ability, VCs also love to see that you're not just converting, but you're retaining those customers. And when you have not just better selling ability, but the right kind of more selling ability, where you are establishing this trust with these customers from the get go, and you have that playbook for fulfillment that's going to allow you to help them smash their goals that they came to you to help them hit and upsell them later, create customers for life. VCs love that. Okay, it's irresistible. So the frameworks and the skills that Revenue Roll gained during our work together increased their ability to earn the trust of their customers in this meaningful way and understand clearly what's most important to them and how they could be of service, which is a playbook for winning the long game. And like we said, it's very attractive to investors. So if you want to see how we can do the same for your solution, let me know.